I was working the front desk at a hostel in Prague when an American couple walked in, looking confused. The woman pointed at the breakfast menu on the wall and asked me, dead serious, "What time is 07, so?" I blinked. 7 in the morning, I said. She frowned. "But it says 07. Is that like -7? Does breakfast start before midnight?" Her husband nodded like this was a reasonable question. I had to explain that most of the world uses 24-hour time. They stared at me like I'd just revealed the Earth was flat. "That's so confusing," she said. "Why doesn't Europe just use normal time?" The same week, I watched an American tourist argue with a waiter in Rome because his pizza came unsliced. He kept saying, "This isn't finished," and pushing the plate back. The waiter kept pushing it forward. Neither would give up. Finally, the American said, "Is this some kind of test?" The waiter just brought him a knife and fork and walked away. I learned later that Italians don't pre-slice pizza. They think it makes it soggy. The American ate it with his hands anyway, but loudly, like he was making a point. My favorite was the guy in Amsterdam who got mad that the train ticket machine wouldn't accept his dollar bills. Not credit card, physical cash, American dollars, in the Netherlands, he told the attendant, "but it's stronger than your currency." The attendant, without missing a beat, said, "Then you should have no problem exchanging it at a bank." The guy just stood there, defeated, holding his $20 bills like they'd betrayed him. These stories sound made up. I wish they were. But when you work in European tourism, you collect these moments like coins. They pile up. And the thing is, most Americans traveling abroad are lovely people. Curious, polite, excited to learn. But there's this small percentage who arrive expecting the entire planet to work like a Texas suburb. They're shocked that other places have different systems, different money, different manners. It's like they thought international travel meant flying to a themed restaurant. And it's not just tourists. I've heard from teachers, hotel staff, tour guides, cab drivers. Everyone has a story. That time someone asked why Africans don't just speak English. That time someone complained that the Louvre didn't have air conditioning like a real museum. That time someone asked if they needed a passport to visit Paris, Texas. Wait, no, Paris, France. The confusion was genuine. So here's a collection of the funniest, most facepalm moments from around the world. These are real stories from real people who've dealt with Americans abroad. And look, every country has confused travelers. But Americans have this special ability to be confidently wrong about things while also being kind of charming about it. It's a skill, honestly. I worked at a tourist information booth in Edinburgh. A woman asked me, "What time does the 1 o'clock cannon go off?" I paused. "At 1 o'clock, I said. She looked annoyed. "But what time?" I repeated, 1 in the afternoon. She sighed like I was being difficult. "I know, but what time does it actually fire?" Her friend had to pull her aside and explain that 1 o'clock meant 1 o'clock. She'd thought it was just a name, like how Radio Shack doesn't sell actual radios anymore. When the cannon finally fired at 1, she jumped and said, "Oh, it's loud." Yes, it's a cannon. Another guy asked me for directions to London, England, while standing in Scotland. I said, "That's about 400 miles south." He laughed. "No, I mean the London here. The one nearby." I explained there wasn't one. He insisted. "Every country has a London." "Where's yours?" I pulled up a map. He studied it, then said, "Why would you name your city Edinburgh if you already have a London?" I didn't even know where to start. My friend worked at the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. An American tourist asked her, "Is Anne Frank here today for photos?" My friend went pale. She gently explained that Anne Frank died in 1945. The tourist said, "Oh, I thought this was her house, like where she lives now." There was a long silence. The tourist's wife whispered something to him. His face went red. He didn't ask any more questions that day. In Athens, a tour guide told me about a man who asked why the Parthenon was already in ruins when the Greeks built it. The guide explained it was damaged over centuries. The man said, Couldn't they have just fixed it? The guide said they tried to preserve history. The man replied, in America, we'd rebuild it correctly. The guide just walked away. A teacher in Japan told me about an American student who asked if Japan was in China. The teacher said no, Japan is its own country. The student argued, but it's all kind of the same area, right? The teacher pulled out a map. The student studied it and said, okay, but do they speak Chinese here? The teacher said, we speak Japanese. The student nodded slowly. So, Chinese. The teacher gave up. In Germany, someone asked their waiter if they could visit the Berlin Wall that hasn't been torn down yet. The waiter said most of it was gone. The American said, can't you just show me the parts you're keeping? The waiter explained there are memorial sections. The American said, so you tore down a historic wall? That's like if we demolished the Statue of Liberty. The waiter said, it was a symbol of division. The American said, still seems wasteful. I was in a bookstore in Paris when an American asked the clerk, do you have this book in English? It's called Les Misérables. The clerk said, that is English. The American said, no, I want the English version. The clerk repeated, the title is French, but we have English translations. The American got frustrated. I don't want a translation. I want it in English, the original. The clerk gave up and just handed him the English edition. He bought it, happy, totally unaware. A museum guide in Cairo said a tourist asked her, how did they get the pyramids to line up with the hotels? She didn't understand. He explained, like, the pyramids face the resorts perfectly. Did they plan that? She realized he thought the pyramids were built recently, positioned for tourism. She explained they were 4,000 years old. He said, no way, they'd be way more worn down. She just stared at him. In Stockholm, someone asked a local, why do Swedish people speak such good English? The local said, we learn it in school. The American said, but like, why? Wouldn't it be easier to just speak American? The local paused. American isn't a language. The American laughed. Yeah, it is. It's what we speak. The local said, you mean English? The American said, no, American. It's different. The local didn't continue the conversation. My cousin worked at a hotel in Prague. An American complained that his room had a bidet. He said, I asked for a bathroom, not 2 toilets. I'm not paying for extra toilets I won't use. She explained it wasn't a toilet. He said, it's in the bathroom and it has water. That's a toilet? She explained its actual purpose. He went quiet. Then he said, why didn't you just say that? She didn't have an answer. I was at a train station in Switzerland when an American started yelling that the train was late. It was 30 seconds past departure time. 30 seconds. He demanded a refund. The conductor explained they were within the acceptable window. The man said, in America, late is late. The conductor said, in Switzerland, we're on time. The train left exactly 1 minute after scheduled. The man was still angry. Swiss people around him looked uncomfortable. Public outbursts aren't their thing. A flight attendant told me about a passenger who refused to turn off his phone during takeoff. He said, I paid for this seat. I'll do what I want. She explained it was international law. He said, international law doesn't apply to Americans. She stared at him. Sir, you're on a German airline flying over the Atlantic. He didn't care. She had the pilot make an announcement specifically about him. He complied, embarrassed, but muttered about freedom the whole flight. In Italy, a woman asked her waiter why there was no ketchup. He said they don't serve it with pasta. She got upset. What if I want ketchup? He said, you can have it, but we don't keep it here. She demanded to speak to the manager. The manager came out. She said, why are you refusing me ketchup? He said, madam, you can have ketchup, but I'll have to go buy it from the store. She paused. You'd do that? He said, if you pay me for my time, yes. She didn't order the ketchup. A hotel worker in Spain told me someone complained that their room was too quiet at night. They wanted the hotel to make more noise so they could sleep. The worker didn't understand. The guest explained, "I'm used to traffic and sirens. This silence is creepy." The worker offered earplugs. The guest said, "That makes it quieter." The worker offered a white noise machine. The guest said, "I want real noise." The worker had no solution. The guest left a bad review. In France, an American got frustrated that shops close for lunch. He stood outside a bakery at 12:30, pulling the locked door, saying, "This is the middle of the day." A local explained it's common in France. He said, "But I'm hungry now." The local said, "So are they. That's why they're eating." He said, "They should hire more people." The local said, "Or you could come back at 2. He said, "That's 2 hours away." The local said, "It's 90 minutes. He didn't get his bread. A tour guide in Thailand said a tourist got angry that people didn't tip. She kept leaving money on tables. Staff kept returning it, confused. She thought they were refusing tips out of pride. The guide explained tipping isn't customary in Thailand. The tourist said, "But how do they survive?" The guide said, "They're paid wages." The tourist looked horrified. "That's socialist." The guide didn't respond. I worked at a pub in Ireland. An American ordered a Guinness and complained it took too long. I explained Guinness takes 119 seconds to pour correctly. He said, "Just pour it fast." I said, "It won't taste right." He said, "I don't care." I poured it fast. He took a sip, made a face, and said, "This tastes wrong." I said, "You told me to pour it fast." He said, "I didn't think it would taste bad." I poured him a proper one. He admitted it was better, but he didn't apologize. In Norway, someone asked a local why it was so expensive. The local said, "High wages, strong economy." The American said, "Why don't you just lower prices?" The local said, "Then wages would drop." The American said, "But things would be cheaper." The local said, "For tourists, yes. For us, no." The American said, "Sounds like bad business." The local said, "We're one of the happiest countries on earth." The American said, "Still seems expensive." A waiter in Greece told me a customer asked for ice in their wine. He politely declined. She insisted. He explained it's not traditional. She said, "I'm hot." He offered cold water. She said, "I want cold wine." He brought her ice cubes separately. She dropped them in. He looked heartbroken. Other diners stared. She didn't notice. In the Netherlands, an American got confused about bike lanes. He kept walking in them. Cyclists rang their bells. He got annoyed. "Why are bikes on the sidewalk?" A local explained, "That's not the sidewalk. That's the bike lane." He said, "Then where's the sidewalk?" She pointed. "The narrower path." He said, "That's too small." She said, "It works for us." He said, "In America, we have space." She said, "In the Netherlands, we have bikes." I was at a gas station in Canada when an American panicked. "The gas is $1.50 a liter. That's insane." I explained, "That's about $4.50 a gallon." He did the math in his head. "Oh, that's normal." But he was still mad the sign didn't just say gallons. A Canadian nearby said, "Sir, you're in Canada." He said, "I know, but still." Still what? He didn't clarify. A bartender in England told me someone ordered a pint and got upset it was too much beer. The bartender was confused. "It's a pint. That's the size." The American said, "I wanted a normal beer." The bartender said, "This is normal here." The American said, "Can I get a small?" The bartender poured a half pint. The American said, "That's too small." The bartender said, "Then drink the pint." The American drank half and left the rest. In Australia, a tourist asked why the weather app was broken. Someone looked at his phone. It was in Celsius. He'd seen 25 degrees and thought it was freezing. They explained Celsius. He said, "Why doesn't Australia use Fahrenheit?" They said, "Why doesn't America use Celsius?" He said, "Because Fahrenheit makes sense." They said, "0 is freezing, 100 is boiling." "That makes sense," he said, "but what about 32 and 212? They didn't continue. A shopkeeper in France had a customer who couldn't understand why items didn't cost round numbers. The prices were like $3.50 or $7, $20. The customer said, "Why not just make it 3 or 7? The shopkeeper said, "Because that's not the price." The customer said, "But it's harder to count." The shopkeeper said, "We manage." The customer paid with a credit card. In Mexico, an American asked why the date was written backwards. The sign said 1508-2024. He said, "It's supposed to be 08-15-2024. A local explained, "Day, month, year." He said, "That's confusing." She said, "Most of the world does it this way." He said, "Doesn't make it right." She said, "Doesn't make it wrong." He said, "In America," she interrupted. "You're in Mexico." A receptionist in Germany said a guest complained about the electrical outlets. "They don't fit my plugs." She offered an adapter. He said, "Why don't you just use normal outlets?" She said, "These are normal. For Europe." He said, "America invented electricity." She said, "That's not how outlets work." He said, "We should standardize everything." She said, "Good luck with that." I had a customer in Scotland who couldn't figure out the coin system. He handed me a fistful of coins and said, "Just take what you need." I counted out the right amount. He said, "Why are there so many different coins?" I said, "Different values." He said, "In America, quarters make sense because there's 4 in a dollar." I said, "We have similar logic." He said, "Doesn't feel like it." I didn't argue. In Japan, someone asked a pharmacist why medicine came in small boxes. "In America, we get like 90 pills." The pharmacist explained, "We give you what you need for treatment." The American said, "What if I need more?" The pharmacist said, "Come back." The American said, "That's inconvenient." The pharmacist said, "It prevents misuse." The American said, "It's just pills." The pharmacist didn't prescribe extra. A taxi driver in Sweden told me a passenger got upset that the meter showed kilometers, not miles. "How do I know how far we've gone?" The driver said, "About 1.6 kilometers per mile." The passenger said, "That's not exact." The driver said, "It's close enough." The passenger said, "Can you convert it in your head?" The driver said, "I'm driving." The passenger spent the whole ride doing math on his phone. In Belgium, an American couple at a restaurant split the bill exactly down the middle. Then they left a huge tip. The waiter was confused. They said, "We always tip 20%. The waiter said, "Service is included." They said, "We know, but it's polite." The waiter said, "You don't have to." They insisted. The waiter accepted, but told my friend later, "They gave me like 30 euros extra for bringing food. I just did my job." I'll end with my favorite story. I was working at a train station in Brussels when an American asked me, "Do you speak English?" In English. I said, "Yes, I'm speaking it now." He didn't catch the irony. He asked, "How do I get to Paris?" I said, "Train to Paris, 2 hours." He said, "Do I need a passport?" I said, "You're going to a different country, so yes." He looked shocked. "But it's so close," I said. "Still a different country." He said, "In America. I can drive for 12 hours and still be in America." I said, "Congratulations." He didn't know how to respond. The thing is, these stories aren't meant to mock anyone. Travel is hard. Being in a place where nothing works the way you expect, where you don't speak the language, where you're tired and hungry and confused, it's stressful. Everyone messes up abroad. I've definitely been the confused tourist in other countries. But there's something specific about the American experience. It's this assumption that the American way is the default, and everywhere else is doing a weird regional variation. Like the rest of the world is a series of themed neighborhoods that forgot to standardize. And honestly, it makes sense. If you grow up in a huge country where everything from coast to coast works the same way, where your culture dominates global media, where your language is the internet's default, why would you expect anything different? You wouldn't. It's not stupidity. It's just insularity. The funniest part is when reality hits. That moment when someone realizes, oh, I'm not the main character here. It's humbling, and most people handle it well. They laugh at themselves, adapt, learn. Those are the travelers you remember fondly. But some people double down. They get mad that Europe doesn't have free refills. They argue with the metric system like it's a person. They try to pay for a bus ticket in dollars and get offended when it doesn't work. Those are the stories that get passed around hostels and break rooms and tour guide group chats. And trust me, these stories never stop coming. Every summer, a new wave of tourists. Every summer, someone asks what time the 1 o'clock cannon fires. Every summer, someone is shocked that other countries have their own money. It's like clockwork, except, 24-hour clockwork that Americans don't understand. So if you're traveling soon, here's my advice. Assume nothing. Ask questions. Be okay with looking confused. The world's a big place with a lot of different ways of doing things, and none of them are wrong just because they're unfamiliar. And maybe bring an adapter for